this morning, I told you we'll be joined by a guest who is going to be here live with us. He is here. Thanks for joining us, Dapo Adaramewa.
Thank you very much, Esther.
I told you I would practice your name and I'll pronounce it correctly.
You did a perfect job. Well
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. Now let's go to education. Yes, so off air you told me you're passionate about that, and I'm glad you are. We have the major story this morning about safe schools. So there is the debate about security and children going back to school. The report here is saying over 12 million children traumatized. First of all, the fact that children are traumatized is already very uncomfortable. Right. And then 12 million. And then, I mean, are you going to look at the security aspect of this as saying that children should be deprived of education at this particular time, or say that, you know, maybe there are some other methods, there are some other ways that this can be handled?
I think the Nigerian educational sector is suffering enough already as it is when it comes to the kind of funding that it's getting in the first place. You know what I mean? Last year was 2021 budget was an all-time low for education in the past 10 years in terms of funding. About less than 6% of the budget went to educate what is about 60% of Nigeria's population, which is unfortunate enough. Now, you then complicate that deficiency by adding in insecurity. That means that millions of children are literally too scared to go back to school. And the ones that are going to school aren't getting quality education. You know, we've had thousands being kidnapped, and we still have hundreds that are missing. So it's a truly very unfortunate situation. And I think when it comes to education, the people are the most powerful asset that any nation actually has. And that's what separates the West from us. We might have oil, but they have educated, intelligent people that find solutions to problems, which we definitely lack. So it's a very unfortunate situation, and my hopes is that the government not only fixes the case of insecurity, but goes further by funding proper education and making sure we have qualified teachers in our classrooms.
Thanks for mentioning teachers, because the first writer I have here says 1,436 pupils, 17 teachers abducted from schools between December 2020 and October 2021. So looking at the teachers now, looking at how the statements, their reward is in heaven, which people are saying that should be changed right now. And then the teachers taking care of the children being abducted. Isn't this going to discourage people from even going into the profession of teaching in the first place?
Definitely. I think teaching is one of the most noble professions that anyone that can undertake. And it's unfortunate that around the world teachers are by and large underpaid. It's very sad. But it's especially terrible in Nigeria as well. And the reward in heaven, wow, it is a very beautiful notion, and we would all like to get there to reap our rewards. It makes sense for us to get a little bit of it here on earth. Yes.
Okay, let's still talking about matters that has to do with security now. Let's go to coups in Africa. I saw a headline, not a headline, an article somewhere where someone says, are coups Africa's latest ways of recovering? Because it looks like it's becoming a pattern. In West Africa, we have seen recent coups, and recently, the latest in Sudan. African Union suspends Sudan over military coup. First of all, is African Union's intervention enough? I mean, I think it was in Mali recently where they asked the ECOWAS team to leave. They gave them an ultimatum to leave Mali. And now African Union is suspending Sudan over military coup. How far do you see the suspension going into, you know, making Sudan a more governable state?
I think the African Union is doing its bit, but it's coming a little too late. Oftentimes, they are silent, quiet, and allow draconian leaders lead countries and drive the people to the point where they create, fosters an environment where coups can and will be successful.
How does the African Union, sorry to butt in, but how would the African Union stop the people from having leaders, the wrong leaders in the first place? Because
I think it needs to speak out on certain issues. I believe it was Guinea where there was a constitutional change to give the president a longer term. The African Union was not there for the people to stand against such tyranny during that time. So there's a lot of steps that they can do in proactively making sure that we don't have terrible leaders. And on the issue of why there's a resurgence of coups right now, it's just because of the economic downturn. The people are hungry, and so they're looking for an alternative. And once you give them a good enough messiah, they will rally around him. there is definitely a resurgence in coups, and anybody that doesn't take that seriously is joking. I mean, Nigeria has a history of one of the highest rates of coups in Africa.
Yeah.
If you think that somewhere there's not some young military soldiers looking at the news and thinking, maybe that's not a bad idea, then we're lying to ourselves. I think we need to prepare and tidy up our house to ensure that these kind of things cannot happen here as well.
But aside all that you just mentioned right now, what are the other things? Let's not just focus on the situation of the people, because you talked about how African Union came in late, and I feel that these people choose their leaders, and sometimes even when they ask for an extension for these leaders, maybe a constitutional review or something like that, it looks like African Union have a limit to how far they can stop the people from making these kind of decisions. What role do you think they should play, in helping in detecting that there's going to be a coup and helping stop it?
I think what they can do is foster an environment that would not be conducive to coups. I'll give the example of during Donald Trump's last days in office, where he spoke supportively of insurrection. Now, what happened was that was a country with strong institutions.
Okay.
The man at the top might have had his wants and desire, but the institutions were too strong. Now, the African Union does nothing to support institutions. Well, shall we say, does very little in terms of supporting democratic institutions.
Okay.
Now, when people are going to the streets to protest against a president's plan to extend his tenure, where is the African Union then? Why are they not speaking against the violence that's happening against protesters? Why are they not supporting protesters? I think if they take a more proactive step, then they will be able to prevent the environment that fosters coups.
Okay, I know you've already mentioned some of the things that causes this in the first place, but let's hear that again. Let's look at some of the reasons why people feel that this is the only way we can restore our country. Looking at, history and some of the coups that have happened in the past.
I mean, looking historically, what makes a country ideal and ripe is usually first you need a very discontent population, right?
Okay.
Now, that could be as a result of insecurity, economic restraint, or economic downturn. First, the population needs to be deeply unhappy, right?
Okay.
Once the population is deeply unhappy, you need weak institutions as well. Now, once you have weak institutions that cannot resist anybody who comes to try and take power, then you've already set up those first two are the basis upon which all that's left then is just one or two military generals feeling like, okay, now is the time, right? And if they run their PR campaign very well, because the people are so discontent with their current leadership, they will rally around the coup leaders, at least in the start. While they promise them democracy, they promise them interim government, and then eventually none of those things ever come.
Whoa, okay, that sounds like a lot. Now let's move to something that has to do with business now. I know we're just talking about safe returns to school and the coup. Now let's go to some matters in Nigeria that affects the day-to-day business and the day-to-day living of Nigerians. And the major thing is electricity. So it seems like once electricity is fixed in the country, a lot of relief will come to businesses and homeowners and things like that. And we have federal government to review licenses of discos and gencos over poor performance. First of all, there's the statement of poor performance. What does poor performance mean from the gencos and the discos in the first place?
I think it would be good to start by explaining to people, I'm sure they know what discos and gencos. The gencos are the people who generate the electricity, and the government does give them targets. You have to generate so megawatts of electricity, which is fantastic. Now, what people are missing is that they might generate the electricity, and you have the discos who then sell the electricity to the consumer. But in between those two businesses is something very important. It's the transmission of that electricity from where it's generated to where it is being sold. That is not in private hands. That is in the government's hands. And what a lot of people don't realize, there's a huge amount of wastage because the transmission networks are weak. A lot of them are old. Some of them are non-functional. So you have this loss of electricity where these people are generating the right amount, but it's not getting to the end user. And then when we talk about the discos as well, we need to understand that some of these discos are facing really hard conditions, and that's because of state actors. For example, it's no secret that the military doesn't pay its bills. neither does the police force, neither. In a lot of states, they actually don't pay the discos. Now, these are private institutions set up to make a profit, but we all know it is the stupidest idea in Nigeria for you to roll up to a military base and try and cut off their lights. It just won't work.
Let's talk about these targets and how do I relate it to myself? I mean, I'm a homeowner. I use electricity. I have appliances. How do I understand what should come from maybe the discos, the gencos to my home as a consumer? Because a lot of people just know that they get they get electricity. They go maybe they have the prepaid meter. They get maybe an amount, maybe 10,000 naira, and they just discover that it used to last for maybe 3 months or 1 month, and now 2 weeks. How do we know, where the change has occurred and what to do and what not to do?
I think first thing first is for a lot of Nigerians to find out what band they're on. There are different bands from the electricity supply, and that entitles you to a minimum amount of hours, usually on average, right?
Okay.
So you could be a band A, means you have about 20 hours or thereabouts. You could be a premium customer, which means you should have 23 hours. So if you know what you should have, you're aware. And the second thing that we can do as Nigerians to help these companies, because they are private institutions, is make sure that we call out people who are stealing electricity. Because if these companies are not making money, then it's very hard for them to maintain the transformers that give us light. So they can't be running at a loss, but at the same
When
time.
you say people that are stealing electricity, are you talking about neighborhoods where they try to, because I can relate with neighborhoods where I've seen stories in the news where maybe they try to go to an environment to disconnect their power supply, and then they are beaten up. Are those the kinds of people that are still? Yes, so that we understand what stealing is.
Yes, stealing is those kind of things. You're taking electricity, you're not paying for it. Either you're bypassing your meter, or you're just flat out not paying your bills, and then now you're beating the person that's coming to cut you off. It's when you think of it as a private organization, it's about as effective as me going into Chicken Republic trying to eat some food, and when they ask me for money, I say, "What kind of rubbish is this?" and I punch the guy. It doesn't make sense. It's a service, and it must be paid for.
Okay, all right. Let's go to cooking gas now. Now we've talked about electricity. Now we have cooking gas. The hike has been in the news lately, and recently we have that the hike is threatening domestic markets. So the home user, the final user, is watching what they do with maybe cooking gas. What is necessary? What should I cook? What should I not cook these days? And there's been a lot of caricature about people coming to your home and you're telling them kindly eat before you come here, just because of the cost of gas, not because they don't want to offer hospitality now. But now we have this threatening domestic markets. Are you seeing the bigger picture as it affecting the economy? Because if the middlemen are saying that it's affecting us and not just you who is buying in kgs is affecting us, how do you see it in the broader spectrum now?
Yeah, I think you've picked up on the right things there in terms of we need to look at it as a general problem in terms of inflation. Now, cooking gas is something everybody can relate to, it's something that we all use, but we all go to the market, everybody buys things, we all buy onions, we all buy tomatoes. We know that things are going up. So there's a general inflation of a lot of things now. It's very unfortunate, but it's something that the government must tackle because the wages aren't going up, the minimum wage is not going up, and so how are people supposed to survive? It's just not right,
All right, just because of our time, let's double on one last conversation. Now, 450 naira feeding allowance moved to 1,000 naira for prisoners. Listening to conversations this morning about this, I've heard comments like the average minimum wage earner is supposed to earn 30,000 naira every month, and a prisoner is about to start eating 1,000 naira meal per day. And some states have not implemented the 30,000 naira minimum wage, and so there's this comparison. Do you see this as something that is going to bring a debate over a period of time? 450 naira to 1,000 naira for prisoners, I mean.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure the prisoners would be listening to this or would hear about this, and they would be like, okay, let's hope that money actually gets to us. That's a whole different conversation. But yes, it is shocking that it's going to cost the government 30,000 naira a month on food, not to talk of it's going to cost them money on accommodation, bills, and water, to house prisoners, whereas the minimum wage will then translate to less than what we spend on a prisoner. We're tethering towards what we have in America, like a military, a prison industrial complex, wherein you spend more on your prisoners than you do on educating your youth. So it's really, really unfortunate that it's getting to that. And I think I wouldn't say they should not give the prisoners the amount of food. They might have committed a crime, but it would be inhumane for us not to feed them. But I think we need to look at that in the larger context of things, of what is really going on in the country, where we're spending more on prisoners than we are, for example, spending on our youth coppers who are actually going out there making a difference in the country. So it's a shocking situation, I think.
Thank you so much, Dr. Adaremewa, for joining us on the newspaper review this morning. I mean, comparing, as you just mentioned, core members, it just took me back to the time. I wish I earned 30,000 naira, but it's fine. Thank you so much for joining us on the newspaper review. My name is Esther Kalu. Till I see you again, do stay safe. Bye-bye.